Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Tuff Laser, and welcome back to another video here on the channel. This is going to be the Ultimate 2s guide in Rocket League that should hopefully help you guys start ranking up fast. I've taken many 2s tips that I've learned throughout the years from the highest level gameplay, and they've really helped me fly through GC2 so far. And some of these tips may sound familiar to you guys, but there's a good chance there are other tips in here that you may have not heard before. This video took a while to make, so liking the video to support it would mean the world to me. And if you guys also enjoy it and are interested in more content from me, be sure to subscribe as well. I'm trying to be really consistent this summer, but without further ado, let's get right into the video. Yo, real quick, Tuff from the future here. It's been a couple days since I recorded the audio for the rest of the video, and I'm currently editing everything right now. And my main vision for this video was to have clips in the background perfectly illustrating every single point that I was going to make, but unfortunately I just don't have enough clips to be able to do that, and that's going to take way too long, and I really wanted to get this video out to you guys as soon as possible. So I tried my best. There are going to be moments where the clips in the background perfectly are lining up with what I'm saying in the video. Otherwise, I'll just have footage of my 2s gameplay in the background as I'm talking about stuff. So be sure to just listen in very closely on everything that I am saying. I think most of the tips are pretty straightforward to where you guys will get it. You don't necessarily need the illustration in the background as well. But if you do have any clarifications, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, you'll notice there's some Squishy Muffins clips in the background. I took a couple from some of his most recent videos to help illustrate some of these points because he's a pro. He utilizes these points way better than I do. I'm starting to utilize a lot of these more consistently myself. So I will have the link to his channel, of course, in the description below if you guys want to watch some of his full gameplay videos. So very soon here, you guys are about to hear some prefaces by me. Please be sure to listen to those and not skip over those because I think those are very important for you guys to hear. I want to preface that this won't be covering every scenario because that's just impossible to do in one video. There's simply way too many to cover, but it will cover many of the most important ones, and I would recommend implementing some of these tips one at a time in your games instead of all at once because that can be overwhelming, and it's easier to get in the habit of using some of these tips if you just focus on that one tip for a dedicated period of time. Once you're comfortable, you can then start implementing another tip. It's very important to note that some of these tips won't be as effective in the lower ranks, meaning below champ, maybe even below grand champ, especially if you're solo queuing, because some of the tips do rely on your teammate, and in the lower ranks, players are going to be a lot more inconsistent. There's a chance I forgot a few important ones since I'll be going over a lot, so if any high level players are watching this video, so like GC3 or SSL, please let myself and the rest of the viewers know in the comments if there's anything I missed, or if there's anything throughout the video that you want to elaborate on or even correct. As always, practice makes perfect, and the more you play the game, the more you'll encounter the same or different scenarios and be more prepared for them in the future. So the layout for this video is I'm going to give you guys some general tips, and then we'll go into how to play offense as a first and second man, and then how to play defense as well as a first and second man. Alright, I want to start out this video with some general tips here. So first tip that I have for you guys: your own corner is the safest place on the entire field, which also makes the opponent's corner not the best place to be in most of the time. And the reason for this is because the angle that the player has to shoot is almost non-existent, which makes the shot incredibly easy to read and save. Really, the only big thing you need to worry about in the corners is a potential infield passing opportunity. Otherwise, you don't need to panic too hard. Having both your defenders in the corner is not ideal because of how non-threatening the corner is. The midfield tends to be the most dangerous spot because opponents can shoot at any part of the net or even get good infield passes. And passing plays are so dangerous because a lot of direction change is happening in a short amount of time, which makes it harder for defenders to react to. So the second tip actually has to do with kickoffs, but before I go into that, I just want to mention something that I probably shouldn't even need to mention, but left always goes on kickoff. So basically what that means is if you're on the left side of the kickoff for your team, you should be the one that's going. The only exception to this is if the person on the right calls in chat that they're going to go for the kickoff, then in that case you want to let them go for it. Otherwise, it's always left goes. So for the actual rule here, you always want to make sure you are cheating up on kickoffs besides a few exceptions. So what is cheating up on kickoffs? Basically, if your teammate is going for the kickoff, you should be driving in from behind, ready, so that way when the ball does stall in the middle of the field, you're able to come in there and make a play on the ball. Typically, nobody cheats up on kickoffs where both players are on the diagonal kickoff, so that is one of the exceptions there. Another kickoff where both players typically don't cheat up is when you and your teammate are side by side at the back. But I have seen people cheat up in those scenarios too, and it can lead to some free goals because I can throw the other team off guard. I'd recommend, especially when solo queuing, to soft cheat though, and what I mean by that is keeping distance between yourself and your teammate instead of hard cheating, so basically going right behind your teammate. So that way there's a lower chance that the ball is going to fly over your head and then you get scored on as a result. By keeping some of that distance when you cheat up, you're giving yourself more time to react to a ball that flies right past your teammate's head and towards your goal. Tip number 3, make sure you understand where your opponents and teammates are at all times. This is crucial information that will help you make the correct decision on what to do. That's why having good camera settings is important, so you can see as much of the field as possible while still being able to control your car well. One thing I like to do is utilize my camera, which is the right stick on controller. So if I'm not sure where a certain player is and I need that information, I can just use that really quickly. Now, of course, you don't need to use your camera every single second, because you can figure out where they would be a second or two later, just based on where they were before. Being aware of everyone's positioning will also make sure you're aware of the possibility of getting demoed at any moment. Sound cues can help with this as well, but demos are a huge part of Rocket League now, especially at the higher ranks, and it can be really detrimental for your team if you get demoed at a crucial moment and get scored on as a result. Alright, my next tip here, this isn't really a tip by the way, but this is more of a definition for a word that I'm going to be using a lot later in this video. Very important. It's committing. So what is my definition of committing? It's using both your jumps to perform an action. So pretty vague, but we'll go into detail here. So every time you flip, you are committing yourself towards a certain direction. This is why excessive flipping is not encouraged, and pros like First Killer, for example, will barely flip. The less you commit, the more flexibility you're giving yourself in case things do go wrong. Double jumping into a challenge as well, that can be considered committing in my opinion, because with a single jump, you're still saving your flip to use it during an appropriate time, during a 50, or maybe you can even use it to use a wave dash to recover quicker. Sometimes you can also use a quick single jump to fake out an opponent with the sound cue to make them think you committed when you actually didn't. Alright, for the next tip here, try not to commit yourself towards balls that are not threatening. So obviously a direct shot on your net being the most threatening. One example here, if an opponent is air dribbling the ball into your corner, you don't need to waste boost and get out of position just to challenge the ball. Always think to yourself what going for the ball will result in for your team, and think the same thing about what your opponent is doing. Most players don't think like this, which causes them to panic a lot, especially on defense. Just because the ball is near your net doesn't mean that if the opponent touches the ball, it's just going to go in at 200 kilometers an hour. Well, maybe in some cases, but you should be able to recognize if an opponent is going to be able to get a shot that's hard to save or easier to save. You really don't need to panic at shots that you know will be weak. Just get the save and a good clear to the corner or even towards the other net if both opponents are way too pushed up. Being patient and letting your opponent make the first mistake leads to many goals, especially in the lower ranks. And another thing as well about not committing towards as many balls, just try to stay as grounded as possible. The more you're grounded, the less you're committing. As I said, the less you commit, the more you give yourself flexibility. Alright, next tip here, being able to read bounces in place before they happen will allow you to play more proactively rather than reactively. So basically, you'll be more prepared for what's about to happen, which can help you play faster. Now, there's this misconception around the term playing faster, that the higher in rank you get, the faster you have to be driving around the field and going for the ball. And while some of that is true, the main point is that you need to be making your decisions quicker, and being able to read things ahead of time will allow you to do that. Sometimes slowing down the play is good to do as well, which actually leads into our next tip here. on booming the ball versus controlling it. This is a very big topic in Rocket League. If the opposing players are set in proper positioning, opt to control the ball, but if the opposing players are not fully positioned properly, booming it can be good to add pressure and make the opponents panic. If you notice the last man on their team is especially caught out and pushed up way too far, that's a good scenario to boom the ball. If your team does not have much boost and you are stuck on defense, it can also be fine to boom the ball away as far as you can and take that time to grab boost and reset. If your whole team doesn't have boost, it's naturally going to be harder to make a proper play anyways when you're going from defense to offense. Sometimes your teammate will also stay further up the field for a longer time as they rotate back on defense, and this is to position for a boom pass to them. And this is something you'll see more in the higher ranks, maybe like once you get to GC2 and above. That's something you'll see a bit more. And remember guys, your opponents will give you a lot more space than you realize, so you will have time to be able to control the ball instead of throwing yourself at it and not being able to follow it up for more touches. Being able to get a soft touch whenever you want to control the ball and get even more follow-up touches is a very important skill to have that will really help you rank up. Hitting the ball with one of your wheels, for example, is a good way to keep the ball close since the wheels get no power on the ball. So that tip is really good for controlling balls that are in the air. If the ball is on the ground, single jumping into it is a really good way to control it because you're also maintaining your positioning, right? You're not committing to the ball, and typically when you just single jump into it, it's going to be a pretty light touch. That's why a lot of times players like to single jump into 50, so that way the ball doesn't really go too far away, and also they can maintain their positioning. And the last general tip before we get into the specifics of offense and defense, if there's a big amount of open space in an area, it can be good to take the ball over there and then make a play. And this is something we'll be talking about as well in these next portions of the video. Alright, so going into offense here, we're going to first talk about the first man. What should you be doing as the first man on offense? Well, your main goal here is to start breaking down the opposing defense. High level 2's defense is always going to be double layered, each layer being, of course, an opponent. And it's going to be very hard to break through completely with just one player if the defense plays perfectly. Let's say you're first man on your team and you have possession of the ball just behind midfield and you're going towards the other net. If an opponent gives you the space, you should be trying to find a way to get it past the first opponent while also still maintaining possession of the ball. This is ideally why you don't want to be doing something where you fully commit, such as a flick, since most of the time you'll be too far away from the ball to go for another touch. Something that is really helpful here is being able to bounce dribble and stay towards the edge of the ball, so that way you can cut into the ball for a quick direction change. This allows you to see your opponent before they're going to challenge as well, and that allows you to touch the ball around them easily while still maintaining possession. This is another reason why carrying the ball on top of your car for flicks when two defenders are still in front of you is not ideal, because it's harder to see when they actually challenge you, and you could get dunked badly. If you do get it past the first guy, and are left in a 1v1, now you can do whatever. You can flick, you can air dribble bump, you could power shot to try and score, or you could even hit it off the backboard if the opponent can't reach it quickly in order to set up a teammate or even yourself for a shot. When the ball is near the opponent's back wall and an opponent is not on the back wall, it's a much harder read for them than it is for you. Now, in that same scenario where you're first man around midfield going towards the opposing net, let's say an opponent is pushed up right near you and you don't have enough space or time to hit the ball around them. Take a 50, but you should not try to win the 50. You really only want to win the 50 if the defender that is challenging you is their last man, because that is going to apply pressure on defense and make them panic. If the defender that is challenging you is their first man, then you should be trying to lose the challenge towards wherever your second man is positioned, which will usually just be somewhere behind you. And you could even throw in a fake challenge too, so that way the opponent slams into the ball and gives your teammate the ball for free while taking themselves out of the play. That is the whole idea of losing the challenge. You're taking one opponent out of the play and you're giving your team more space and opportunity. Another thing to note for first man is if you're done making your play, if it's not too dangerous and it's on the way through your rotation, look for demos on opponents. You'll mostly want to look for demos on their last man, and also corner boost steals on their side, because that's a huge way to break a defense down. After that, get behind your teammate and try to stay in the play with small pad pathing if you are still maintaining pressure on the opponent's half of the field. Another thing to note about rotating after you've made your play, rotate through the field, don't rotate ball side, because that can really throw your teammate off. And what I mean by ball side, just the same side that the ball is on, right? So it's better to just rotate through to the other side where the ball is not at, and then go behind your teammate there. One more tip that I have for you guys on offense as first man, if you're rotating out, but you notice your teammate is like all the way back, like in your net, in your corner boost, whatever, when they should be going for the ball next, it's honestly fine to just cut in and try to keep some pressure if you want, instead of giving your opponent all that space to do whatever they want. So just check your camera, whenever you're rotating out. Sometimes you will have to cut in for a teammate that is slacking when it comes to their positioning. I've had to do that sometimes as well, even when I was playing some GC2 games. That's just kind of how it is. So even though cutting in rotation is a good thing to do sometimes if your teammate isn't doing what they're supposed to do, you shouldn't be doing this all the time. I notice a lot of people, especially in the lower ranks, they'll just cut in after they just went and go for the ball like 3 or 4 times in a row. Not only does that clog up the rotation, but also most, if not all, of those hits are probably going to be for no reason and completely unnecessary, so do keep that in mind. By the way, if you're ever directly under the ball, in most cases it's best to just rotate out of the play at that point, because when you're under the ball you have no vision of anything around you, and you're not going to have any momentum going into the ball, you're not going to have a good angle, but your teammate behind you most likely will have a much better angle, momentum, all of those things. So the only time you should really be going for the ball in those kind of situations is if the ball is literally going into your net. Finally, do not take yourself out of the play completely and leave your teammate in a 1v2. This happens far too often in 2s, and the first man will blame their second man for not clutching the 1v2. If the opposing team plays that 2v1 perfectly, there's almost nothing your teammate is going to be able to do. One player just needs to go for demo to at least kill the momentum of the defender's car or make them jump, and the other player with the ball can just play off of that. So long story short, for first man on offense, you're trying to be a disruptor to the defense and make it easier for your team to score a goal in the end. Now let's get into offense as the second man. So as second man, your main priority is always protecting your net, as you are the last layer of defense. If the ball gets past you, the opponents have an opportunity to score. Even though we are focusing on the offensive role of the second man right now, it's always important to keep this in mind. You always want to be playing behind your teammate. In the same scenario we were talking about, where your first man has the ball around midfield going for an attack, you don't want to be pushed up the same amount as the first man, because if the ball goes behind the first man, nobody's back to protect the net. You instead want to be waiting for a 50 or hit to come back to you, or be ready to go for the ball next after your first man is done with the play and is ready to rotate behind you. That will then transition you into the first man. Generally speaking, if your first man is pushed all the way up on offense, I'd recommend staying around midfield area. The last thing you want to do is push up way too far and the opponents just boom the ball into your net across the field for a free goal. Sometimes it is tempting to go for a ball that is right in front of the net, but if there's no guarantee that you can get there in time, or your teammate isn't ready to cover your back after you commit, I'd recommend not going for it. Offense in Rocket League will sometimes be a long game where you'll have to get multiple shot opportunities before finally scoring anyways. You also do not want to be too far back from the play. The more you play people at your rank, the more you'll understand how far away you should be positioning from your teammate. Being able to read the opponent's card, understand exactly how far they could hit the ball away, can really help with this. Alright, now we're at the defense portion of the video, and honestly, most players in the game do not know how to defend at all. So if you can get really good at this alone, you'll be able to skyrocket in ranks depending on where you are. Let's get into how you want to defend as the first man though. The term forcing is going to be an important concept for the first man on defense. What is forcing? Well, forcing means to force your opponent to do something with the ball when they have complete control over it. So the more space and time you give an attacker with the ball, the harder it will be for your defense to stop them, which is what makes 1v1 so difficult. Luckily in 2s, you have the luxury of a second teammate, so your first man can force the opponent with control to just give the ball up to the second man for free. You typically force by using a non-committal challenge such as a fake challenge, and some people will call it a drive challenge in this case, or maybe a single jump fake. to make the opponent think you're aerialing at them. When an opponent is air dribbling the ball towards your net, that is a situation where, as first man, you want to be aerialing for the ball or forcing the opponent to air dribble it high towards your backboard, where the second man should be ready to receive the ball. If you go too high above the ball and force the air dribble to go low, then the opponent is going to be able to recover quicker and make another touch immediately after. That's hard for your second man to react to. Even if you get a bump, that's a lot better than not hitting the ball or not forcing the ball high. By the way, guys, when it comes to forcing an air dribble high for your teammate, in the lower ranks, I would say honestly probably below GC2. Honestly, I would not count on your teammate being ready to be on the back wall, so instead you just want to be going for the ball and getting a hit on it at all costs. When someone has an air dribble and they're going towards your net, they're pretty threatening, so you do want to just get the ball out of their hands as best as you can. If there is a possible situation on defense while you're rotating back, where if your last man challenges the ball and then the worst case scenario is that the opponent scores because you can't get back as that second layer, you do want to be cutting into the play if possible to act as that first layer and then let your teammate be the second layer. There might be some situations where you can't cut in for your teammate or be there as a second layer of defense in time. In that case, you do want to assess why you couldn't get back in time or what led to you being out of the play for too long. Alright, let's get into defense as the second man, and this right here might be the most important thing I'm going to say in this entire video. If your first man is completely gone on the opponent's side of the field for a while, you just need to stall as much time as possible before they can get back. There are so many times in literally every rank where the second man fully commits to a ball against the other team's first man, loses the challenge or gets dusted to the ball, and it's just in their net. Ideally, your teammate will rotate back in time so that way you don't have to 1v2 or 1v1 the entire time. Otherwise, you just have to try your best. On a side note, for any situation in twos where you could challenge, if you for sure know you can beat your opponent to the ball and still benefit your team, even if you're in a risky position, then you certainly can. Sometimes the other team's second man could also be pushed up too far and you could hit the ball past both of them, which would be huge. This is obviously more risky to do as a second man, but sometimes if your team desperately needs a goal, many risky opportunities with a chance at a goal could be worth taking. The best way to stall is by utilizing shadow defense, where your back is turned towards the player with the ball so you can cover your net in front of you. This also allows you to turn in and pounce on the ball as well if the opponent does mess up. Knowing how much distance you should have between yourself and the opponent while shadowing might take some trial and error. Shadow defense and being able to hit balls that players try to hit over you in that position is crucial, and there are definitely training packs out there to help you for those kind of situations. Sometimes you can even bait the opponent with the ball to dribble or hit the ball into your own corner with shadow defense, which is really ideal as we mentioned earlier in the video. And speaking of the corners, sometimes the best play is to hit the ball all the way back into your corner if the ball is transitioning from the other half to your half and you need to stall for your teammate. If your teammate is rotating back quickly enough to where you can challenge the opponent and then your teammate will be set up as that second layer of defense by then you can go for the ball. Keep in mind some of the rules mentioned earlier about challenging, such as being able to get the ball past the first guy and still maintain possession, and forcing the opponent to give the ball to your teammate. Generally, back post positioning is an ideal position to be in as second man, as you're able to cover the entire net, since all of it is in front of you and it's easier to go faster forward than it is backwards. So some of you guys may be wondering what back post is, and all it means it's the post that is furthest away from the ball. So for example, one opponent could be on the left side of the field with the ball, and the furthest they can shoot it obviously is all the way to the right. So that right post, that is going to be your back post. That's where you typically would want to be positioned. But back post is very situational, so you don't need to be there all the time, but most of the time, especially in lower ranks, it is ideal. One benefit with back post is you're also closer to the wall, so you can give yourself flexibility to turn up the wall as well if you notice your first man is going to force an opponent's air dribble high off the backboard, or if an opponent just straight up slams the ball into your backboard as well. Backwall defense becomes even more important in higher ranks because opponents are able to hit double taps more consistently, and you don't want to be giving them those kind of shots if you can. Those are all the tips I have for you guys today. Hopefully they help you out. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know down below in the comments. Another thing as well, many high-level players, they like to think about how they play twos in terms of like resources, like boost and players being resources with certain value and trade-offs. That's a bit excessive for this video, so I didn't want to get into that. But as I said earlier in the video, if a lot of these tips are new for you guys, I would recommend just trying to implement each tip one at a time rather than all at once, because it is very overwhelming. And another thing to keep in mind, guys, after hearing these tips, you might not improve right away, and that is totally normal. At the end of the day, practice makes perfect, and the more experience you have, the better. The more hours you put in utilizing these tips, the better it's going to be. It's one thing to understand kind of what to do, it's another thing to like execute it perfectly, and so that's going to take time. And the more time you practice doing these tips, the better you'll be at them, and you'll be a better overall player because of it. So if you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like. Once again, it really does help a ton. I spent a lot of time making this video. I even made a whole script for a lot of the things that I talked about because there just was a lot. And also, if you guys are interested in seeing more content from me as well, be sure to subscribe. I've been trying to make a ton of YouTube shorts lately, so if you guys want to check those out as well, that'd be greatly appreciated. I will see you all later. Have a good one. Peace out.